I'm curious what your observations were, knowing that a president like Lyndon Johnson, who was burdened by the Vietnam conflict, still managed to pass all this progressive legislation, and how he compares with Clinton and also with Obama.
Lyndon Johnson, too, will be reevaluated in history, and the tapes will help us do it. It's been a great embarrassment of our lives that since 1968, I think his name is scarcely even mentioned at conventions of the Democratic Party. That's how supercharged all of this is. Clinton would often say, by the way, that I think it was some very high figure. He said with almost 80% accuracy, you can predict how people are going to vote by the answer to one question. Do they think that the 1960s, on balance, were good or bad for America? That we are still polarized over all of those lessons. Johnson didn't pass much legislation after Vietnam. Certainly after Vietnam heated up by the end of 1965. To me, it was just a chilling coincidence that the 1st Marine Battalions landed at Da Nang on the very day of the march at Bloody Sunday across Pettit's Bridge. So that those two stories thereafter, although it took a while for the war to register, were marching along in parallel. The Immigration Reform Act that I mentioned earlier was passed in October, signed in October. By then the battles were large and the war was beginning to get serious. So there are a lot of similarities between Clinton and Johnson in their tactile approach to politics. Clinton would say outright that all the wonkism in the world is no good if you can't make human contact with the people that you need alliances with to make them bear fruit in the world. And he prided himself on his ability to make contact not only with citizens in a receiving line where he would tune out the whole rest of the world, and he liked that. I mean, but in political meetings. And he shared that with Johnson, making a contact. He told me once that his biggest failure in foreign policy was that he never made a personal connection with Jiang Zemin, the president of China. And he said, that's a failure on me because our relations and the future of China is really important. And if you don't have a real bond, something about their family, something about their sense of humor, something that can enable you to talk about things other than your implacable differences, you can't begin to break down walls. And he said the differences with Jiang Zemin were so implacable that one of their he said he was trying to get Jiang Zemin to answer some human rights things, and Jiang Zemin said, one day we will be talking to you about human rights Chinese style, maybe 50 years from now. Your cities are uninhabitable, your prisons are full, your schools don't work. Who is to say your freedom is worth it? And he said, when you hear something like that from a leader, you need something personal to come back with. But that's just a small sample of the raw dialogue that he presented and put on the tapes. Most of Clinton's legislative achievements are hidden because they're hidden under this press thing and the mantra that he didn't care about anything in public, that he was a finger in the wind politician who triangulated to the tune of Dick Morris and everything, which is pretty hard to reconcile. There's one chapter in here that we had a session the night before he announced he was going into Haiti in 1994. And he said, I'm going in with 8% public support. My best friend in politics, Dale Bumpers, has just come in and said, the first American casualty, you will be impeached. There is no public support for this. He said, I've got racism working. I had racism working for me briefly when Haitians were washing up on American shores and there was some support for doing something. Then I stopped that while I was building the international coalition, and now I have racism working against me because nobody cares about Haiti. Notwithstanding its long history, notwithstanding the notion that if democracy can make gains in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, it will bear fruit all around the world. But I'm going to do it anyway. And he did. And almost nobody cared. Almost nobody cares today. But quite apart from what you think of Haiti, of that mission, and there are lots and lots of details about it in the book, how the mantra could continue blithely that he never did anything out of conviction when he went into Haiti like that, and disregard Haiti and a number of other things, like, for example, the NRA. He was after the NRA. He was the only president to go after the NRA from start to finish. The Brady Bill, the assault weapons ban, all of these things. Even President Obama prudently said, it's suicide. Don't expect any gun initiatives from me. This is a matter of conviction, and yet these images continue. So his legislative achievements do not compare with Johnson's. He would not claim that. His pursuit of peace mattered a lot. He proved that we can eliminate the national deficit if it matters to us. He was dismayed when he left office, having paid off $600 billion of the national debt in the last year and a half, with a projection to have paid off the entire national debt by next year. That instead, that there was no retrospective on the Clinton presidency as to what that would mean to grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would no longer have a public mortgage hanging over them at birth that they would have to service before they could hire a policeman, a soldier, or earn $1. There was none of that. So his record is better than it is appreciated now. It doesn't compare with Johnson's. His failure, which he said was his failure, was giving away his chance to confront cynicism by allowing the Monica Lewinsky scandal to trump everything else he did and allow people to say, see, I told you so. All politicians are corrupt. He has to live with that. But I think he would rather live with that than to live with Vietnam.